Sir Manuel Hornibrook came from humble beginnings and built what became the #1 construction business in Australia. He built Brisbane's iconic bridges, the Story Bridge, the Victoria Bridge, the William Jolly Bridge, and the famous Hornibrook Highway. One of his greatest triumphs was construction of the sails of the Sydney Opera House. He was a giant of a person, a huge character, and a giant of the Australian construction industry. He lost his father at a young age, at the age of 9. He left school early. He was an apprentice carpenter. He started out in building. He brought his brothers into the business. So by sheer grit, determination, hard work, they built up a building company that developed the skills and capacity to build so much in Brisbane, bridges, so many different types of building works. He enlisted his brothers as apprentices and they were apprenticed to him. So he always brought his brothers along with him. He was clearly the leader and he saw that he could do things, that he could build houses, he could get jobs, he could work out how to do pricing and then start to get jobs and more jobs. So he had a great self-knowledge from a young age and a confidence and a boldness as well. My grandfather was a very dominant figure and I know that he negotiated very well with government, but I think he came to the table in a pretty strong-minded and forceful way. He was pretty single-minded and he didn't suffer fools gladly, and he was pretty impatient because he always had things to get on with. Workman worked for Hornibrook Company for 30, 40 years. There are many examples of people who started out with him and retired with him. There was immense loyalty in the workforce, so they really loved going to work and they felt very supported as part of a family business. And there are examples of people who didn't have work, particularly in the Depression, and if they really tried, Emma would give them a go. The contract for William Jolly was let from 1928 and the Story Bridge opened in 1940 after the war, Second World War had started. So there was that decade of the 1930s where there was employment for hundreds of people through those projects. I think the economic impact of the contributions by Hornibrooks to Queensland and Australia is really huge. There were more than 100 bridges that they built. The really big projects they took on during the Depression, the number of people that were employed and would have been so much harder in Queensland without those initiatives in those very difficult years. The sales of the Opera House, Sydney Opera House, were, I guess, the zenith of the career of Manuel Hornibrook. He was very proud of being involved in that, and they constructed stage 2 and stage 3 of the Opera House. My grandfather was getting older by then, but he still was seen on site and he was still seen climbing scaffolding very high in the sky and making sure people were doing the right thing, and I'm sure he was obsessed with thinking about how various problems could be solved. Evans Deakin and Hornibrook had a collaboration over many different projects through the building of the Grey Street Bridge, the William Jolly Bridge. Then when they went on to the Story Bridge, in the tender there could only be one supplier, one contractor to go for the tender. So Evans Deakin Hornibrook became a consortium and they put in the bid to win that tender. And Evans Deakin provided the steel that they brought in through their Rockley works, and that came from throughout Australia, and there was great pride that that was Australian steel. So Hornibrooks had the workforce and Evans Deakin had the steel, so they were a very strong collaboration. That was a big part about building that bridge and working in with the other team of engineers, designers, Bradfield and the Brisbane City Council. Hornibrooks was the leading construction company in Australia in the 50s and the 60s. By 1964, my grandfather had some health issues and was starting to make decisions around retirement. And then an offer came through to the company and the board from Woodhall, an English company but a multinational company. The board decided to accept their interest in buying into the company. In the Hornibrook story, my grandfather's brothers were very important. Absolutely. Family business, and each of them was so very capable and were directors of the company and worked in that company all of their lives. I think my grandfather never forgot his roots in the Obi Obi Valley. They were formative years for him, his siblings, his parents, uncles, and really defining for them. Those small rural areas always need ongoing support, so I think that stayed in his heart. And also when they built the Hornibrook Highway and needed timber for the bridge, he knew exactly where to find that timber, and it was in the forests around the Obi Obi area. So that served him well in his life as a builder as well. Emma was definitely a visionary. When he started his building in the early part of the 20th century and built up his company through so many changes and so many decades, and was so much part of the growth of Brisbane and Queensland and Australia. Absolute visionary. He never wanted to live anywhere else. He always saw himself as that and was very proud of that. So Manuel always saw himself as a Queenslander. He always lived in Queensland, lived in Brisbane. He gave back to the community in Brisbane. That was who he was. There was no doubt about that.